You have to get a survey out, you've got to get the results back, and then you've got to build on that persona. So there is a lot that you have to do in that first week. That would be the very first thing I would say is know who you are and the brand that you want to put out there, and then use every network option that you have, and then build on that. Decide who you are, what your brand is, and what you really want to put out there, and build something that you can do full throttle. Like, use every network opportunity that you have. I was able to gain some really valuable skills through video editing of the podcast, through building a website, through getting stuff out there. I might one day want to go to the communications department of the organization I work for, or I might want to one day actually launch my own nonprofit. And this course helped me do that, even though it's not something I was initially ready to do. Just think about the skills that you can gain by continuing through the course and learning, and then you're being inspired by what your classmates are doing and thinking about what you can do to build on the skills that you have. Because I definitely got some new experience out of this that I value highly.
Today, I'm joined by Danielle Roberts. Danielle, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
I'm Danielle Roberts, and I am a healthcare project manager for a health plan. I work in the quality department of that plan. Prior to this, I also was the resource and development manager for a senior service nonprofit in the San Antonio area. That will kind of come into play as I discuss how I went about navigating the course that I was in, which was AI and personal branding. I'm a senior at UTSA, and I am going through my communications major program very slowly.
We have accelerated classes where you're taking one class every 8 weeks. In the AI and personal branding class, you came with a bunch of experience with your own nonprofit work, and you were able to parlay that into your personal brand experience. Can you talk a little bit about the struggle that you experienced in trying to make sure that your personal brand fit with this nonprofit?
I did truly struggle. I started out at the beginning of the course thinking, okay, I don't have my own personal brand. I'm going to go the employee route. And presently, I'm a project manager for a health plan. So when it came to thinking how I was going to leverage that, I thought, okay, for the survey, that's not going to work very well, because as a project manager for a health plan, my target audience would be other health plans or doctors. And there was no way I was going to be able to get a survey out in 1 week and get that back from those groups of people. So what I ended up doing was I was thinking back to my previous role with the senior service nonprofit, and also my caregiving experience with my stepfather who passed away last year. And I thought I can leverage that knowledge and that experience into a nonprofit that I can work with for caregiving. But I couldn't use my actual past employer. So the way that I navigated that was to make up my own kind of fake caregiving organization. That worked really well for the first half of the class. But it came with some challenges afterwards, because we had to put stuff out into the real world. And I had to be really careful about launching and broadcasting and advertising a fake organization into the real world. But I do have real caregiving experience. I do have real nonprofit experience and healthcare experience that I could incorporate into that. So it was a challenge for sure to navigate all of those things.
And when you first started with the research, you were actually surveying and interviewing who for your actual nonprofit?
So for my nonprofit that I made up for the course, what I did was I leveraged the networks that I had. I do have Discord servers that I'm a part of. I have my Facebook groups. I have the nonprofit community that I had connected with here. And I was able to get a survey blasted out pretty easily and get responses back within a couple of days, because I was able to kind of cast a wide net. Caregiving it touches just about everybody at some point in their lives. And so I was able to find quite a few people, friends, family, Facebook, the senior service, the nonprofit organization that I had previously worked for, and they were very responsive, because when you go through that, it's very stressful and intense, and wanting to share those experiences is that was something that they were appreciative of, and they responded. I got, I think, like 60 something responses just in a day or so. So it was pretty good.
That's something that most people really struggle with. So it's great you were able to leverage your network in order to get those kinds of valuable data points that then allowed you to craft your persona more accurately. After you got done with the persona and you were building your website, what were some of the things that you found most fun?
Well, I enjoy the creative process, and I used the Canva websites. I'm just more familiar with that particular platform. So it's really fun to be able to use their templates and kind of incorporate some of the other things. I did also leverage the Adobe products. I definitely leveraged Adobe stock photos. That was really helpful. Building the website also enabled me to incorporate, even though it's my fake organization, I was able to incorporate real resources. So if you do go to my website, you're going to still have valuable information there and linking to other things. So what I found most fun was, even though this is fake, can I make this look nice? How can I link all of these pages together? And can I still make it helpful, even though it's not a real organization, but if somebody comes to it, can they still be helped by coming to it? And those were fun things to think about and try to piece together.
We know that it was challenging to adapt a personal branding assignment to a nonprofit organization, but that's part of the fun of being able to take these kinds of courses, is that we can adapt them to the needs of the student. What were the challenges there? And how did you navigate those challenges?
So, one of the challenges there was being able to, again, like, launch it into like my real world life. So when we got to the LinkedIn assignment, that's when I got really concerned about, how do I put a LinkedIn post out there that won't be fake or make me look bad to anybody that's really in my real world network, because I already had a LinkedIn profile. So what I ended up doing was I found something that was applicable both to caregiving and to the healthcare role that I'm currently in. And for me, that took some thinking. I was like, what can I do? What am I working on in my healthcare role that also applies to the previous caregiving things that I know about? And I ended up making a post on the pneumococcal vaccinations for older adults, because that's something I work on. It's something that's applicable to anybody that's in a caregiving situation, making sure that they're asking their doctors about that. But it's tricky to put something out into the real world when I'm trying to also be really careful not to falsely advertise this organization that doesn't exist. So that was one of the challenges. The other challenge was along the same lines. The weekly posting that we had to do, as far as like put this on a platform, and now that you put this on the platform, we were having to answer a specific question every week on that. So the way that I navigated that was, I just so happened to still be a volunteer with my previous organization. I actually helped them with the constant contact e-blast that they do. And I leveraged my work with them in that role to use my social media posting, because I can't put a fake organization blasted out on social media. So I had to use that. But that's kind of how I pieced that together and navigated that challenge.
It sounds like you had a very different experience than a lot of other students. In what ways did you see other students responding in those peer reviews and in those intercollaborational opportunities?
So the other students in the class were actually really positive with their feedback of my website. One of the tricky things, which I knew I was going to hit, was a lot of the times when I'm in classes with people, the majority of my classmates are younger. And so when we're talking about, I don't know the the exact age demographics, but if we're talking about people that are in their early adult years, early 20s, late teens, etc., they don't necessarily have the caregiving experience just yet in their lives, unless they took care of like maybe a grandparent or something like that. So a lot of the times the feedback was something like, I didn't know about this, or I don't have a lot of knowledge, but I appreciate your website. I appreciate what you're sharing about caregiving and what this role was. So that feedback was helpful because they were learning about caregiving and that nonprofit work from my content. And likewise, I was learning about some newer design skills and newer opportunities to improve the look and the feel of my site and my blog and the videos that they shared with me. And so that was an interesting interaction with them. And I also really enjoyed learning about their projects. And I'm excited about some of them. I actually hope that some of them really are out there and succeeding, because they actually did have real personal brands. So I'm like cheerleading for them. I hope that works out well.
What did you see that worked in their projects? And how did that relate to what worked in your project? Because on one hand, you have a nonprofit. On the other hand, you have an actual personal brand, but they're both trying to achieve similar goals.
What I saw that worked really well in their projects was the way that they were able to really leverage their real personal brands and get that out to their social media contacts. They were able to kind of build more on LinkedIn, which they hadn't done before. And they were able to take feedback from their peer reviews and improve their sites over time. There were some of them that I went back to throughout the course, and I was just like, oh, they actually took that feedback to heart and they put more graphics into their website, or they did XYZ things. And I can tell that they're really trying to launch this and get this out. And when it comes to any kind of nonprofit work, it's relatively the same, right? You want to be able to build onto your brand for your nonprofit. You want to be able to leverage that to get more donation opportunities, more volunteer opportunities. And so even though my organization was a fake nonprofit, I was really trying to build on everything that I had known before and everything I was seeing them do with their brands to try to make this a visually appealing and inviting organization to want to interact with.
And whenever you were trying to build the visuals and the infographics and have all the data points support those infographics for your final portfolio, what were some of the challenges or successes that you saw both in your campaign and others?
So the infographics was challenging for me. First of all, so like once again, I used the Canvas site. So I had a platform issue. I actually had to do a lot of manual work on my infographics rather than just using a template. They have infographic templates that are great, but it didn't fit well with the format. So I had to really play around and make mine fit well into the website. Beyond that, I had, and so did a lot of my classmates, had a struggle with getting the actual data, right? If you didn't already have a podcast going or an active YouTube channel, you don't have good demographics. It'll probably say, hey, we don't have enough data to find out how many of your viewers are male or female or non-binary. We don't know where your viewers are located. You might have 2 subscribers. It was difficult to pull those data points from YouTube, but then you could pull them from other places like LinkedIn would have some demographics on your posts, some analytics there. And you really just kind of had to piece that together. The way that I pieced together some of my gender and geographic data was to go back and look at some of the comments that I had. So if I had comments, based on people that I had shared it with outside of class, and I knew those people, I was able to say, okay, that was a female. This is their basic age range. This is their location. Same thing with using any kind of student comments in our peer reviews. So I was able to kind of incorporate that and just manually counting. And I was able to provide some gender data, some geographic data, but it was still very vague and pieced together because I just didn't have a great deal of views and comments on the YouTube. So some classmates did. Like some classmates might have gone through the podcasting class earlier and they've had their podcast up and running and they were just able to pull that in. I think at least half the class had to pick and pull and piece things together because the real data just wasn't there. We haven't had enough time launching our brands to get that collected yet.
That's not uncommon to see amongst students because it does take time to build an audience. It takes time to build a following, and it takes a lot of posting and a lot of work to nourish an audience. However, you did have the advantage of the Discord and the groups, the online Facebook groups. Can you talk about how you leveraged those later in the project as you went forward with your branding expertise?
So for my Discord and Facebook groups, my Discord group is actually nowhere near related to any of this. It's a different group, a different community of people, but they're people that are in my network or that I've been able to kind of leverage in general. And once again, caregiving is everybody goes through that. I was able to put posts up early on for the survey. I was able to launch just posts like, hey, I've got this YouTube video. Can you guys take a look at this, and give me some feedback? And really kind of the same thing on my Facebook groups. And I could say, hey, would you mind providing feedback on this? And, when I was able to kind of post that and get that out there, once again, I was able to get some people to view it. I would still say my YouTube videos, the views weren't tremendously high, but the reach that I had on those networks is still pretty good. That was probably my biggest strength. Just that I had those networks built in already. But, the reach and actually getting people to engage is still, that's always a challenge.
Definitely. Tell us about your lead magnet and your social media content planning experience.
So my lead magnet, one of the things that I really wanted to put out there for the lead magnet was I wanted to make sure that the first thing that you have as starting a caregiving journey is learning to create a care plan. It's not the end all and be all. It's not going to solve all your caregiving problems, but it helps you get things organized. It helps you think things through. So for the lead magnet, what I wanted to do was put together a very basic template of these are some things that you need to go through when you're starting to look at helping to take care of an older adult. So my lead magnet incorporated, like thinking about what are their medication needs, what are their AM medications, what are their PM medications, their activities of daily living. So, bathing, dressing, like, do they need help with these things? And as you get somebody thinking about, those things, they're able to kind of organize and put things together. So my lead magnet was basically a template for just trying to put together a care plan. And so that was one of the things that I thought would be most helpful. And then navigating that on social media, like once again, was being able to put that out there and getting feedback back. I'm like, if you have been on a caregiving journey for, XYZ amount of time, would this have helped you? And so that enabled me to be able to incorporate the things that I was hearing back and put that on the website and get everything linked up correctly.
You already had a very strong LinkedIn presence due to being in the workforce for maybe a little bit longer and having that experience. How did you leverage that? And how would you leverage that if you were going to create a personal brand that is a real personal brand where you're actually putting yourself out there as an expert in caregiving?
I did leverage that, and again, one of the ways I was able to leverage that is I'm in healthcare now, and I was in the nonprofit senior service organization before. So I had the connections from that nonprofit community, and I have connections now from the healthcare community, that I'm in with the health plan. So what I was able to do again with the pneumococcal vaccination posts, I'm like, this is applicable to everybody. This is applicable to the healthcare work that I do. This healthcare work is very much linked to what you have to navigate as a caregiver. You have to navigate what the healthcare needs are of the person that you are working with. And if I were to launch the nonprofit organization that I made up as a real organization, I would use LinkedIn to say, this is my organization. I would really love, engagement and, incorporation, etc. with that organization. And I would love your thoughts. And what are the things that you think I would need to make this a more impactful endeavor? And I know that my network of professional people, both from my previous role and from my current role, would give some feedback on that. And that's what I would do. I would leverage that network to really launch that and get that out.
You have a huge skill set and critical thinking, critical planning ability from your normal job. How did that translate to this course? And were there any skills in this course that might help and cross apply to your actual work experience?
Right. So as a project manager, there are processes that you have to get into place in order to get a project from start to finish. And you've got to navigate all of the different things that you need from different departments and different people. So you have to really kind of organize and set things up so that things launch and go according to plan on a timeline. In regard to the assignments, that was helpful because when we're trying to get all of this done, especially when we're crunching 2 weeks worth of work into 1 week, you have to be able to plan out your week. It's like, these are the things that are due. This is what I need to do on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, etc. And so it kind of helped me plot my timeline of how I was going to complete a specific assignment and look at the different elements that I would need. In regard to helping me with my projects, I absolutely did use a lot of the AI skills in some of my current projects at work. So one of the most important things I would say I learned was, because we were using AI so much to get our project work done, that helped me learn more efficient and better prompts to use to get some things out of my work life. So in my work world, I was working on a project that was helping older adults to get into annual wellness visits with their providers. And part of that process, we're working with the vendor, was that I had to have scripting together. So I had to get a script for the providers, like that we were going to tell them that we were launching this campaign. We had to get a script for phone calls to the members. We had to get another script for emails and text messages. There was like a whole handful of scripts. And learning to use AI better, more efficiently in this course helped me really get those scripts honed in. And it got me approval process through our communications department much faster than any of the projects I had been working on before. So that was really very helpful to me.
Having that kind of success must feel great. And I know that you've learned some things, not just from the course, but through trial and error in using AI. What advice would you give to students who are new to AI who want to get the best results?
So one of the things that I did in this course was I looked at previous projects, and that was one of the nice things that Professor McPherson did. He posted previous students' projects, and in those other projects, you could see the prompts that those students used in their Chat GPT sheets, or if they use Copilot, and you could see what they were doing to get the results and the results that came back. And it's a little bit of trial and error, but I would put something in and it would spit a bunch of stuff out. And I'm like, that's not quite what I'm looking for. I need to hone this in. How do I do this? So trial and error on my part, but also really looking at what were the kinds of prompts other people were putting into their projects and what was the feedback it was giving back to them. And that really helped me learn. There were also the video modules, video content for the interviews that were posted. Some of that was also helpful when you're listening to the interviews of people who are using AI all the time and they have communication experience out in the real world using these tools, and they would have some tips and tricks here and there. So I really kind of absorbed as much of that as I could. And just like anything else, practice makes perfect. You keep on working with it and learning. And that was the process that I used to get better prompts out of Chat GPT.
Excellent. And there are certain things that you got from those interviews or from the text or from the AI module that helped you to narrow down the kinds of results that you wanted. For example, limiting the AI to a task, to a role, to specific scope of output. those kinds of nuanced details? Can we dig deeper into how you got the best results based not only on your experience, but on those little tips and tricks that might have been in the course?
Sometimes I would start out and I would say, okay, this is the prompt for the assignment itself. If I didn't know where I was starting, I would just use it as brainstorming. And I would say, okay, this is the assignment using my audience persona that we had done. What can I do to get these things accomplished? And it might spit out a whole bunch of generalizations. And from there, then it would give me some ideas and I could kind of hone in further and I could say, okay, let's eliminate XYZ thing that came out of this. If I just want to do this, can you give me some ideas here? And so then it would spit something back out and it would be less and more honed into what I was asking it to do, and then I could say, okay, I just want one paragraph or this many words into this. And please, can you use this experience that I had here? And so I would have to kind of type in a specific thing. And every time that it would come back at me, I would say, this is like, we're getting closer to something more specific. And then it would give me something and I would say, I can work with this. Let me rewrite some of this so that it's a little bit more targeted to what I'm trying to get to. When I rewrote it, then I would put it back into the Chat GPT and just say, can you please fix any grammatical errors or can you make this language flow better? It was still a bit of a process, and a little bit of a back and forth conversation with it. Now and then I would get frustrated and I would just do like the repeat thing. But as I was going along in the course, I would listen and learn to some of not the professors, some of them were professors, but the people that you were interviewing. And I would kind of listen to some of the things that they were talking about. And just seemed to be that as I went further along in the course, I didn't have quite so much back and forth, right? I was able to really target in on what I was looking for because I had been working with it for a while before. And so you get better at learning about what specifics to put in the first place. But when I first started out, it was very general. It was very vague. And the more general you are, the more general the stuff that comes back is going to be.
So the advice of get specific fast sounds like really useful advice for our students.
Yes. If you know what you want, and exactly what you're looking for from it, you're going to get good, fast results. I kind of start off and I'm a mess and then I just clean it up as I go along. But it's a skill, right? It's a skill to learn how to build these prompts and you get better the more you do it.
Absolutely. And in the course, we had different projects. Was there a project where you found yourself using AI more and it being more useful compared to other projects?
I think, especially in the very beginning, the number one thing that I was able to use and leverage well was the audience persona, all of the things that you're building based on your survey and based on what your personal brand is. That's going to be, for me, that was the biggest thing that I got out of it. And from that, then you're able to keep going back to it for every assignment and saying, using my audience persona, because it keeps all of that information. So I would say I used it more in the beginning. And then as we went along, I think especially for the media kit right at the end. So the beginning and the end, because you're putting different pieces together and the media kit has so many different elements in it. For every page, you want to be able to get something going with your text faster. You've already got these pieces together. Can you pick and pull from this thing and that thing? And then can you put a paragraph together for this page? And then you go to the next section and you put a paragraph, and it really helped me in that regard. So I used it a lot for the scripting towards the end of the course for that big assignment until we find what I already had there. So beginning and the end, I think, are my two biggest AI uses.
That makes complete sense because at the beginning you have a lot of data and at the end you have a lot of data. And the best way to use AI, leverage AI often is whenever you have these large sets of data to tease out that meaning with really specific and targeted prompts. What advice would you give students who are coming to the course and they're not sure what to expect? Maybe they're a little bit reticent to use AI. Maybe they're a little bit afraid of using AI because of all the plagiarism concerns and the valid, real need for ethical use of AI. What advice would you give them?
I had some of those same concerns. I've used AI, but am careful about it. So when I use AI, I want to be really careful to make sure that it's not like I'm not just plugging things into AI and using exactly what it's spitting back out. There's usually a back and forth refining of the language, and I don't necessarily use the last thing that Chat GPT set out word for word. Beyond that, just having the Chat GPT like conversation sheets, which we had, that relieved any issue regarding plagiarism. But I would say I think it's really important to make sure that the language that is coming out of Chat GPT accurately reflects what you would say and what applies to your personal brand. I don't think it's anything to be afraid of. I just think you have to tweak it and make sure that it really fits what you're trying to do, and then make sure that you have the full exchange on that Chat GPT sheet that you put up with all of your assignments to make sure that it's not, you're crediting Chat GPT with what you've used it for in a particular assignment.
That's the key. It's building on the work, the outputs in a way that is unique and productive for your specific personal brand. At the same time, as you said, citing the models. What other advice do you have for students who are about to take this course?
I think, the number one thing I didn't know when I signed up for the course is that this is going out into the real world. So that was my biggest challenge. I just didn't realize that we were setting up a brand that we were really launching and we were trying to use all of our networks for. You don't have a lot of time in the very beginning to decide what your personal brand is, but that's the number one thing that you want to focus on is decide who you are, what your brand is, and what you really want to put out there, and build something that you can do full throttle, like use every network opportunity that you have. That's probably the one regret that I have, is that I still had to be so careful, and I don't know exactly how far I could have gotten if I had really put everything out there to my network and not had to worry about any kind of privacy issues or just launching something that wasn't real. So that's my biggest thing is make sure that you know what you want to put out there and try to get honed in on that very quickly, because you don't have a lot of time in the beginning of the course.
The Ikigai is designed to help with that.
It is. Yes, that was a helpful exercise.
But at the same time, it's hard work.
It definitely is. It's right from the very beginning. The first week was super stressful because you're trying to get your introductory module, the Ikigai map, and then you're trying to get a survey out. But first you have to figure out again who you are and what you want to put out there. You have to get a survey out. You've got to get the results back, and then you've got to build on that persona. So there is a lot that you have to do in that first week. That would be the very first thing I would say is know who you are and the brand that you want to put out there, and then use every network option that you have and then build on that to get it out there.
And it's the foundation that serves as the core of what you're building from that point on, right? Because all the work that you're doing in the beginning, yeah, it's intense. There's a lot to do, but that serves as the foundation for everything that follows.
It does. And that's what like I was describing before in the media kit, which is the very last assignment, you're still going back into, in my case, I use Chat GPT, and I'm saying using my audience persona and using the thing from, this prompt that we did XYZ however long ago that was. Can you build on this? So you are using all of that initial data and the persona throughout the course. And that's that very first week. That's intense. That is the foundation of what we're working with. And I'm always going back to Chat GPT saying, using my audience persona. And that's the first thing that I would put into most of my prompts.
That is a gem of advice that a lot of people are going to really find helpful. Because it's easy to forget that what you've done is what you should be using whenever you're really focused on just one project. For example, how do I write this blog? How do I create this podcast? How do I create this trailer? Well, it all comes back to the audience. And that's an axiom of the communication discipline, that we always consider the audience first as we try to craft our messages, craft our strategies or communication.
Yes, absolutely. And it was helpful to be able to build on that, build on everything that we had gone through and go back and refocus. And it was something that was always at the top of my mind when I was putting my assignments together. Once again, I knew that my audience for the assignments in regard to my peers, that wasn't going to be my audience. Like they had to do my peer reviews, but for the most part, my classmates weren't the ones that were in caregiving situations. So I still had to go back and consider not my classmates, but my actual audience, my persona of a caregiver. And in my case, I think that was like a late to middle-aged person caring for an older adult parent. And that's what I had to craft my messaging for. And then I had to hope that my classmates could kind of relate to that, even if they hadn't experienced it, so that they could give feedback that would be helpful. And so it was a tricky thing to navigate, but I think it worked out well and I learned some valuable skills.
Good. I'm very excited to hear that because that's part of the goal, right? And you were incredibly innovative in answering these kinds of project questions and creating innovative solutions to the projects and the assignments that we had assigned. What was some of the innovation that you saw your peers doing that you particularly appreciated? Was there a project or was there an idea or a podcast that stood out in your mind as, oh, that was great. I really like that.
Yes, that one classmate specifically runs an NFL podcast, and I don't know if he took one of your podcasting courses before, but he had a leg up on all of us because he had that going for at least a year, and he runs it with another person. So he's got a real deal podcast, and one of the things that I think is so innovative about the way he's doing this is he has made this to where if you don't have a lot of sports knowledge, he makes it accessible. I'm not a big football person. I'm just not, but I'm surrounded by football people. So every now and then I'm going to have to like sit through a football game. And I am actually interested in certain stories, player stories and whatever, but it's hard sometimes to sit through a game and not know what's going on. The way that he has set up his podcast was to make it to where they break down how they discuss what's happening in a game and what's going on with the player profiles so that somebody who is not necessarily a sports fan could tune into that and could learn and still be interested. It really just makes it accessible to non-sports fans and then sports fans alike, right? Because they would also tune in because it's a shared interest. So he has, I think, a really successful podcast so far, especially considering that it's still relatively new, but his numbers were phenomenal. And it makes sense to me that he has great numbers because it's really interesting. It's a good take on that. I'm not going to tune into ESPN and listen to all that. That's a lot. But what he's doing is pretty cool. I liked that a lot.
And the way that he's able to make football, in this case, accessible is a great example of how you're able to take a niche, get specific, and then make it more broad after you've gotten specific. Because I think that's just something that a lot of people struggle with. They're like, I can't do just one thing. I am multitudes of creative. And it's very difficult for a lot of people to pick that one thing. And this is an example where you, as caregiving and caregiver, and he, as football, have chosen one specific thing, niched down, and gotten really good at explaining that. And that attracts audience members who may not be interested in caregiving or football, right?
I think it absolutely does. And that's one of the things I think both, as they're not anywhere near similar, but they have that thing in common where, he can say, this is, sports is accessible and it's enjoyable for everybody. There is a way that he can make that appealing to somebody who's not necessarily a sports fan by talking about player stories, by talking about these other different elements. And on my end with caregiving, I can say, this is something that touches just about everybody's life. It might not have touched yours yet, but it could, and it probably will, because as we age, we find out that we've got family members or we've got maybe friends or some other person that that needs our help and we feel compelled to help them. And these are some tools that you might have. And so it was one of those things where it's like, even though I'm talking about something that is very niche, especially if I'm talking about it with younger adults, it's one of those things where it's like, this affects you. It just might not have affected you yet, but here are some things that you should know down the road because it probably will. And so that's what we were, I think, both able to do. That's what that has in common. You can take this niche thing and you can say, this actually affects you more than you think. There's a place for you in this.
There's a place for everyone, right? In personal branding. Do you have any parting wisdom or parting thoughts to share with our audience?
I think the biggest thing and the biggest favor that I did for myself was, when I first signed up for this course, again, I didn't exactly know what it was. I didn't know what we were putting out there. My mentality is, okay, this isn't necessarily the best fit for me, but I'm here and I'm going to try to learn from this and see what I can get out of it and see how I can kind of keep plodding along, even though I have these weird challenges that my classmates are not navigating. And so I would say that if you feel in the beginning of this course, like I did, where you feel like I don't belong in this course, I would say take a learning and a growth kind of mentality and try to go through it anyway. Try to learn and just really put yourself out there and see how you can piece these puzzle pieces together to learn the skills. Because again, even though I don't have this real world brand and organization or what have you, I was able to gain some really valuable skills through video editing of the podcast, through building a website, through getting stuff out there. I might one day want to go to the communications department of the organization I work for, or I might want to one day actually launch my own nonprofit. And this course helped me do that, even though it's not something I was initially ready to do right now. If you feel stuck in the beginning, just think about the skills that you can gain by continuing through the course and learning, and then you're being inspired by what your classmates are doing and thinking about what you can do to build on the skills that you have. Because I definitely got some new experience out of this that I value highly, even though I don't really have a real personal brand I'm out there launching right now.
Excellent advice and a great way to end this conversation. Danielle, thank you for volunteering your wisdom and your time. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Professor McPherson. I appreciate you.